Hi, it's Katrina. What's the dumbest and most dangerous thing that you've ever done? Was it jumping from a roof into a pool? Or perhaps getting a little too close to a wild animal? Here are 10 people that didn't really think about what they were doing before it was too late. The journalist and the crocodile. In 2017, journalist Paul McLean got a little too close to an angry crocodile. Paul, just 24 years old and working for the Financial Times, was taking some surfing lessons in the coastal town of Panama in Sri Lanka. His problem wasn't the surfing lessons, but rather going to the toilet in the wrong spot. Paul was on vacation with a couple of friends when the incident took place. They all took the surfing lessons together, and it seemed to go well. It was after the lesson that Paul wandered off to find somewhere to use the bathroom. Big mistake. He stumbled into an area that happened to be infested with hungry reptiles. He did his business, then bent over the lagoon to wash his hands in the water like an innocent gazelle, and that was when the crocodile got him. The lagoon is right next to the sea, so it was an easy mistake to make. There wasn't any real way for Paul to know he was sticking his hands into the mouth of a vicious crocodile. The surf instructor should have warned him. People saw some movement, and then he was gone. The problem is the water was murky and deep, so Navy divers came to try to help him. The day after he was last seen being dragged off by the crocodile, Sri Lankan police discovered his body. Divers found Paul, or what was left of him, in the muddy lagoon. He had several wounds on his right leg from where the crocodile had bitten him. While crocodile attacks are rare in Sri Lanka, it was a very sad day for Paul and his family and friends who said he was a wonderful person with a great career ahead of him. The balloon priest. Tying yourself to 1,000 balloons is not something an ordinary person would voluntarily do. But Father Adelier Antonio de Carle was no ordinary guy. He was a man of God who wanted to raise money to build a chapel for truck drivers in his parish in Brazil. He cooked up the scheme to strap himself to a chair and fly away, carried by 1,000 helium balloons. It sounds quite silly, but it's actually very sad. He started his daredevil stunt in the Brazilian port city of Paranagua on April 20, 2008. He wore a helmet and a thermal flight suit with waterproof coveralls. He was also attached to a parachute in case he needed to abandon the ship. His goal was to break the record for the longest time ballooned in the air, which in 2008 was 19 hours. Father Carle was also an experienced skydiver and survivalist. He had also done a similar stunt earlier that year using 600 balloons, and it had gone well enough. This time, it didn't go very well. 8 hours after floating up, and away, the priest lost contact with his team on the ground. Helicopters and airplanes searched desperately for the wayward priest, but it was no good. 2 days after takeoff, a couple of colorful balloons were seen floating in the sea off the coast. Several months later, in July, half a human body was found. DNA tests confirmed it was Father Carle. Nobody knows what happened, but suspect he was blown off course and got lost. The bat bite. In 2021, an elderly man in Minnesota was bitten to death by a bat. His name was never released for privacy reasons, but according to The Independent, he was 84 years old when he woke up one night in July 2020 to a bat biting him. He had no visible wound, so he washed his hand with soap and water. Still a bit nervous he might have rabies, he took the bat to get tested. It turned out the bat did have rabies, so the senior citizen was given a post-exposure prophylaxis treatment. Since his wife was next to him in bed during the attack, she was also given the treatment. But it wasn't enough. 5 months after the elderly man was viciously attacked by a bat while he slept, he suddenly developed rabies symptoms. He was sent to the hospital in January 2021 after experiencing weeks of terrible night sweats. He developed a fever, and days later, he was gone. This marked the first reported failure of a post-exposure prophylaxis rabies treatment anywhere in the Western world. The man from Minnesota is currently the only person known about in the West to die from rabies even after getting the proper treatment, and all because a bat broke into his house and bit him on the hand. It might have been better if the bat had turned him into a vampire. Too much water. Doctors have confirmed that cold water and obesity were major contributors in the death of Kelly Jean Poole from England. Kelly died during a water therapy session on April 25, 2022. Cold water therapy has become increasingly popular in recent years, a shockingly dangerous type of therapy that's been pushed by celebrities and other advocates. Social media stars claim that cold water therapy can help all kinds of detrimental health conditions. They say it can treat inflammation and cardiovascular disease and even cure depression. However, doctors are adamant that not enough research has been carried out to say whether it's effective or not. The therapy session went like this. Kelly and the other customers completed breathing exercises in their swimming suits at the edge of the river for about 15 minutes. Then they went into the cold water, which was only 51.26 degrees Fahrenheit. Shortly after entering the water, Kelly complained about an ache in the front of her head. Then suddenly and without warning, she fell forward into the water. She was dead. Cardiologist Dr. Damian Kelly said it is possible that the cold water caused Kelly's heart to stop. The post-mortem examination revealed that she died from sudden cardiac death. Doctors did say that Kelly was overweight, which likely didn't help the situation. Being overweight and plunging into cold water was almost certainly what caused her heart to suddenly give out. The failed stunt. French climber Remy Lucidi was discovered dead on a Hong Kong patio in summer 2023. Remy was a popular climber with a massive following on social media. In Hong Kong, they called him Lucidi. He was known for taking on dangerous stunts and engaging in extreme sports. He recently gained attention for climbing to the top of a high-rise near Chernobyl and dangling above the city. He climbed rooftops in Bulgaria, Bangkok, and Dubai. One of his more recent posts was from the top of a tower in Bulgaria, with the caption, "Life is too short to chase unicorns," followed by this skull emoji. The French daredevil fell from the 68th floor of an apartment in Hong Kong at only 30 years old. According to the South China Morning Post, Remy lost his footing while outside a penthouse of Tregunter Tower, which is 721 feet tall. He gained access to the building by lying to one of the security guards. He said he was visiting a friend on the 40th floor, then went to the 49th floor. He forced open a door and snuck onto the outside of the building, where he lost his footing and fell to his death. It's believed he got stuck outside while taking selfies on the edge. One of the building residents said Remy knocked on their window, but they were too suspicious to let him inside. Then he slipped and fell. The Cocktail Challenge. In summer 2023, British tourist Timothy Allen Southern went on a vacation to Jamaica. The 53-year-old Englishman was with his family when he joined a pair of Canadian tourists who were celebrating a birthday. The Canadians were participating in something known as the Cocktail Challenge, where a person guzzles 21 cocktails as quickly as possible without dying. Timothy wanted to challenge the Canadians, claiming he could easily down the 21 cocktails. Timothy managed to get 12 of them down his throat before he suddenly started feeling bad. Timothy excused himself and went back to his hotel room, where he was discovered later by family members. Timothy was found on the floor of his hotel room choking. His family quickly put him into the recovery position, only for Timothy to start vomiting. He was unresponsive and growing cold. They tried to shout for an ambulance, but nobody called one. They gave him chest compressions, but his pulse petered out and stopped. Timothy died there in his Jamaican hotel room from what doctors later said was acute gastritis with associated alcohol intoxication. Sucked into the engine. Over and over again, an airline worker was warned not to go near the engine of an airplane. Multiple times, this person was warned not to go anywhere near the engines. Right before the American Eagle flight from Dallas landed at Alabama's Montgomery Regional Airport, the airline worker was part of a 10-minute safety briefing. In the briefing, the ground crew was explicitly warned to avoid the engines. Then, just before the airplane arrived, there was a second safety huddle in which it was reiterated that the engines would be running and the crew members were to stay far away from them. The crew was informed that both engines would be left running for a 2-minute cool-down period. They were to wait until the rotating beacon light was turned off before approaching the engines. So the plane landed. It pulled into the gate, and the first officer opened the cockpit window to say yet again that the engines were still on. But somebody wasn't listening. Almost immediately, the captain saw a warning light come on as the plane shook violently. The number 1 engine had shut down without being told to do so. What the captain didn't know was that the engine shut down because on the ground, an airline worker had been sucked into it. The ramp agent, after being told again and again not to go near the engine, went near the engine and was sucked into it like a stray pigeon. Tragically, the ramp agent was killed. During the investigation that followed, it became very clear just how many times she was warned to stay away from the back of the plane. One ramp agent told the safety board he had tried to warn her when she nearly fell over because of the engine exhaust. Then, a second ramp agent saw the woman trying to place a safety cone near the back of the plane. He signaled for her to wait, but she kept on doing what she was doing. Seconds later, the engine sucked her in. She was even seen in the security footage clearly walking directly in front of the engine without a care in the world, moments before her life ended. The electric lake. Thomas Milner's only mistake was trying to have fun. The 24-year-old jumped into Lake Lanier during a hot day in July 2023 and was electrocuted. The dock belonged to Thomas's family, who had owned the property for about 3 years at the time of the incident. It should have been a fun summer day. Instead, Thomas hit the water and started screaming. He was being electrocuted by the lake, which had somehow become electrified. His family and friends tried to pull him out, but the lake was rippling with electricity. One person tried to jump in at the risk of their own life, but had to immediately get out of the water because it felt as if they were on fire. It was only after somebody located a power box on an adjacent dock and flipped it off that they were able to get Thomas out of the water. But by then, it was too late. Thomas was taken to the hospital and later pronounced dead. It's still unclear how the lake became electrified. The best guess right now is that an electrical current leaked into the water from the nearby power box. It's something that can happen, though it's incredibly rare. Have you ever accidentally electrocuted yourself? Let me know what happened in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Over the edge. The body of 21-year-old Madeline Davis was found in the water of Diamond Bay Reserve in January 2020, shortly after she was reported missing. Davis was an English tourist on vacation to Australia with a group of friends when she died. Davis and her pals went to Diamond Bay where they watched the sunrise at about 6:30 in the morning. That sounds nice, right? Davis wandered away from the main group to the top of an extremely perilous cliff. She had been trying to snap the perfect selfie of herself at the edge of the cliff with the epic sunrise behind her. Sadly, it was the last selfie she would ever attempt. Suddenly, her friends realized she was gone. They called emergency services, and about 4 hours later, Davis's body was found floating in the water. All along the cliffs, there are signs warning people to stay away from the edge. There is also a fence that you're not supposed to cross so that you don't fall off the cliff. The city recently increased the height of the fences in the area to prevent this kind of thing from happening. There are also extra languages on the warning signs in case you don't speak English. In the case of Madeline Davis, she ignored the signs and the fences, all to get the ultimate selfie. The burnout. Dale Wilson was killed on an afternoon in July 2019 during a police chase. According to the cops, a patrol officer tried to intercept Dale's vehicle prior to the crash because it was found to be unregistered. Instead of stopping and dealing with the police, Dale hit the gas. He did a huge burnout in front of the cops, then took off speeding. The police determined it was too dangerous to chase Dale because he was driving recklessly, so they called it off. But Dale never let up on the gas. Several minutes later, the police came upon the flaming wreckage of his Holden Commodore sedan. Dale wrecked his car and died in the process. The day after the accident, his brother spoke to reporters. Dale's younger brother said it was a stupid decision that took his sibling's life. He visited the crash site to pay tribute. When asked what happened, Dale's brother said his sibling probably panicked. Dale would have been scared of going to jail, so he tried to outrun the cops. Instead of getting away, his decision to flee and his erratic driving ended his life in a wreck of twisted metal. Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Tiger. Cynthia Lee Gamble, an experienced tiger handler who lived in Danforth Township, Minnesota, unexpectedly lost her life to one of her big cats in 2006. The 52-year-old woman's remains were discovered in an enclosure on her property where a 500-pound Bengal tiger had mauled her to death. Gamble had kept tigers for over a decade with no issues, according to Pine County Sheriff Mark Mansavage. A friend went to visit her and found her body, and the local community was left heartbroken, especially for Gamble's 14-year-old son, Garrett. It appeared as if the sliding door to a tiger enclosure was left open, and the animal attacked her more or less without warning. The tragedy was completely unforeseen, especially given Gamble's many years of experience with big cats, with her animals even appearing on NBC's Today Show and in the major movie Vertical Limit. Simply put, if anyone was qualified to handle tigers, it was her. This unfortunate incident reminds us that no matter how accustomed someone is to interacting with wild animals, at the end of the day, they will still behave according to instinct. Python. A 31-year-old Hampshire, England man named Dan Brandon learned the hard way that it is actually possible to love someone to death when in August 2018, his 8-foot-long African rock python, ironically named Tiny, attacked him. Brandon's mother found him unconscious on his bedroom floor with the snake nearby, and it was unfortunately too late to save him. She had heard a loud thud coming from her son's room earlier that day, but assumed he had dropped something. Brandon was an experienced snake handler who never had problems with Tiny before the unfortunate tragedy. The coroner concluded that he died from constriction and that the snake probably coiled itself around his neck and squeezed him, possibly out of affection. Although Tiny didn't eat the man, there are many instances of pythons devouring their victims. In June 2018, Indonesian authorities reported that a 23-foot-long giant python killed a 54-year-old woman named Watiba and swallowed her whole. She had gone missing days earlier while tending to her vegetable garden, with just her sandals and machete turning up the following day. Local residents found a strangely bloated python and killed it to find out what was inside its stomach. Gruesome footage of villagers cutting the snake open and discovering Watiba intact went viral, sparking widespread shock and horror across the internet. Even if snakes have feelings and don't want to eat you, a hug from an 8-foot python is just not a good idea. Wolf dogs. Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania resident Sandra L. Pyovison was extremely devoted to the 9 wolf dogs she spent 10 years of her life raising since they were cubs. That all changed in July 2006 when the 50-year-old woman's body was discovered at her home in Salem Township, inside an enclosure where she kept the canine hybrids. Sandra's wolf dogs had turned on her and mauled her to death, an autopsy determined, and the coroner ruled multiple soft tissue injuries as her official cause of death. They may have been more wolf than dog and had most likely become a pack amongst themselves, and she was not included. It sounds crazy that someone would keep a pet with wild DNA and not expect something like this to happen, but Pyovison's 9 wolf dogs were just a handful of the thousands that are known to exist. There are also varying definitions of what a wolf dog even is. Some people argue that wolves and dogs are essentially the same animal since they are so genetically similar. Others think of them as a direct first-generation product of dogs mating with wolves. But there is an actual wolf-dog breed, which originated from dogs and wolves breeding, but goes back several generations. We do not breed wolves to dogs, explained John Davis, vice president of the United States American Wolfdog Association, who spoke with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette following Pyovison's death. We breed American wolf dogs to American wolf dogs. We raise dogs. Davis shunned any negative media coverage of Pyovison's death, pointing out that attacks are rare. Although the woman was not a member of the organization, her wolf dogs were not registered, and she did not have the necessary license from the Pennsylvania Game Commission to own the hybrids. Curiously, the agency knew Pyovison had the animals, but did not take action because she did have state dog licenses, and it's difficult to prove whether a canine is a dog or a wolf. Over the course of several decades, police visited the woman's house numerous times in response to complaints of noise and odors, but never charged her with any crimes. In the words of Westmoreland County Humane Officer Elaine Gower, she was pretty much on guard with me because she knew that I knew that this wasn't a great situation. Turned out very badly for her. Pigs. In 2012, a 69-year-old farmer named Terry Vance Garner went outside to feed the pigs at his rural Coos County, Oregon property and never returned. His family leader found his dentures and body parts in the pig's enclosure. Although the man's cause of death seems obvious, considering the circumstances, prosecutors were not quick to rule out foul play or a medical emergency, such as a heart attack, that may have caused him to collapse. They also wondered if Garner's pigs deliberately knocked him over while he fed them, especially considering that one of the animals had displayed aggression to the farmer on at least one previous occasion. For all we know, it was a horrific accident, but it's so doggone weird that we have to look at all possibilities. District Attorney Paul Frazier told the press while announcing plans to have a forensic anthropologist examine Garner's remains. Domestic pigs are typically non-aggressive, according to John Killefer, head of the Animal and Rangeland Sciences Department at Oregon State University, but there is some degree of danger associated with any animal. Moreover, Garner's pigs were much bigger than average, tipping the scales at over 700 pounds, begging the question of whether their size played a role in the tragedy. Humphrey the hippo. After ignoring repeated warnings that his pet hippopotamus Humphrey was a dangerous wild animal who could never truly be tamed, Marius Els, a South African farmer and army major, was found dead, submerged and mutilated in a river. His pet hippo had bitten him to death. The 40-year-old man had purchased Humphrey when he was just 5 months old, after he became too big for the family who originally took him in after rescuing him from the very river his deceased owner was found in. Over the years that Humphrey spent on Els' 400-acre farm, he became like a son to the man. The pair swam together, and there are even photos of Els fearlessly riding the 1.3-ton animal. But Humphrey was far from harmless. He had an established history of breaking out of his enclosure, chasing people, and killing livestock. Even Els' wife was uncomfortable with keeping a hippo as a pet, but this did not stop the man from doing what he wanted. "There's a relationship between me and Humphrey, and that's what some people don't understand," Els said months before his death. "They think you can only have a relationship with dogs, cats, and domestic animals, but I have a relationship with the most dangerous animal in Africa." It is indeed true that hippos are responsible for more human deaths than lions, elephants, leopards, buffalo, and rhinos combined. As it turns out, Els learned the hard way that he was no exception to this statistic, despite believing that he had a special connection with Humphrey. Cats. In July 2010, humane officials were given the gruesome task of removing a dozen cats from an Albion, Pennsylvania home, where a 74-year-old former teacher named Herbert Walden and his 94-year-old mother Jane were found dead. Enough time had passed, over a week authorities believed, for the cats to become desperate for food and start eating the elderly gentleman's foot. Walden likely died from a heart attack, according to the Erie County Deputy Coroner Korak Timon, the Morning Call reported. Jane, who relied on him for care, probably succumbed to dehydration following her son's death because she was unable to fetch her own water. By the sounds of things, the Waldens' living situation was unhealthy to begin with. Their home lacked running water and was strewn with garbage stacked nearly to the ceiling. With no usable toilet, the pair went to the bathroom in buckets and transferred the contents into containers which lined their hallway. And in addition to the 12 live cats that the authorities rescued, they found a dead dog and 4 dead cats. Spiders, bugs, and lizards. This story is somewhat of an internet/urban legend, claiming that residents of an apartment building in Dortmund, Germany, noticed an unbearable stench coming from a neighbor's unit and summoned police to the scene. What the authorities supposedly encountered was a nightmare. The dead body of the apartment's occupant, Mark Vogel, had been gnawed on by hundreds of spiders, several snakes, thousands of termites, and a gecko. The 30-year-old man who kept a practical zoo in his home was fatally bitten by his black widow spider, Bettina, the story says. It was like a horror movie, a police spokesperson is quoted as saying. His corpse was over the sofa, giant webs draped him, spiders were all over him, they were coming out of his nose and his mouth. The spokesperson's description only got more horrifying from there. Larger pieces of flesh torn off by the lizards were scooped up and taken back to the webs of tarantulas and other bird-eating spiders, he continued. This is definitely a great story for Halloween. Gabby Bayer, a spider expert and animal cruelty officer, reportedly said that the creatures, which included several poison frogs, should never be allowed in a private home. Vogel allowed reptiles to freely roam the residence, news reports claimed, and his spiders escaped their cages following his death when their heating units exploded. This is arguably the most gruesome story, maybe, but it also holds the distinction of being of questionable credibility. At some point, the story caught the attention of ABC Australia's Media Watch, which published an article showing that the story had been published numerous times over the years, including in 2004, 2007, and 2011. Despite this, the story remains as popular and believed as ever. Teddy the Black Bear. Ross Township, Pennsylvania resident Kelly Ann Waltz loved the animals she kept in her hilltop menagerie, which included a tiger, mountain lion, and a 350-pound black bear named Teddy. Get it? Lions, tigers, and bears. But the animals didn't necessarily love her back, as the 37-year-old woman learned the hard way in October 2009, when she went to clean Teddy's cage and he mauled her to death. Kelly's husband, Mark Waltz, had kept animals for years as an exotic pet dealer at the couple's home in the Poconos Mountains region. Nothing out of the ordinary indicated that Kelly might be in danger when she entered the black bear's 15 by 15-foot steel and concrete cage to clean it. Unfortunately, a shovelful of dog food wasn't enough to distract Teddy that day, when for reasons none of us will ever fully understand, he turned on his owner. Kelly's children and her neighbor's kids witnessed the horrifying attack and scrambled for help. By the time someone shot Teddy dead, it was too late to save her. No matter how comfortable someone is with their wild pet, it's customary for owners to use two-section cages that enable them to isolate the animal and safely clean the enclosure. Tim Conway of the Pennsylvania Game Commission told CBS that why this woman chose to go in the same area that the bear was in is beyond me. It's a fatal mistake. Monitor lizards. When Ronald Huff of Newark, Delaware didn't show up for work one day in 2002, police conducted a welfare check. What they found inside Huff's home was nothing short of horrifying. The man's corpse propped upright against a door, being devoured by his 7 Nile monitor lizards. The 6-foot-long creatures were covered in their owner's blood and had consumed his face, hands, and some of his internal organs. A week or two before Huff died, one of the monitor lizards bit him, causing a staph infection. In a 2018 interview with The Sun, Huff's former neighbor, Jeff Wildonger, explained that the man allowed the reptiles to roam his apartment freely. Although the cause of Huff's death was ruled inconclusive, Wildonger believes that he must have had a fever from his staph infection and sat down near the front door, one of the only cool places in his home, which he kept at a high temperature for his pets. His cheeks had been eaten off and his molars were where his ears should be, said Wildonger, who caught a glimpse of the traumatizing scene. As officers attempted to confront the scene, the venomous flesh-eating reptiles hissed at them. Some of the lizards were relocated to zoos, while the more aggressive ones were euthanized. Travis the chimp. Sometimes you just have to wonder what people are thinking. Why do you want a chimp as a pet? They are incredibly smart and loving, but they are also strong and wild and don't really belong in a house. Unfortunately for a woman named Charla Nash, her best friend's chimp Travis turned on her and attacked her. Travis was actually an animal actor and had appeared in TV shows and commercials. He was raised by hand at what is now the Missouri Chimpanzee Sanctuary and became well known in the town. He had been socialized around humans since birth, and while he did like to play and wrestle, he always seemed to know when to stop. Sandra Harold had raised the chimp herself, considering him as her adopted son, but was having trouble one day in 2009. Travis had gone on a tirade and had escaped the house. Charla came over to help, and things got completely out of hand. She and the chimp knew each other, but she had changed her hairstyle, which may have confused Travis. Next thing, he was attacking her, biting her face and hands. Sandra started hitting him with a shovel to get him to stop, and he turned and got angrier. She called the police, who at first thought it was a hoax, but you can actually hear the screaming in the background. Sandra screams, "He's eating her!" Charla suffered horrendous injuries, but medical personnel had to wait in case they got attacked as well. Police finally arrived, and Travis attacked the vehicle, smashing the windows and opened the passenger door, where a police officer shot him several times. He died, and the story became international news. Charla had huge medical bills and tried experimental face transplant surgery, but was very afraid to show herself in public. She sued her friend for $50 million. Thanks for watching! I hope you never have a bad experience with an animal. Always be extra careful and let me know if you have any stories in the comments below. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!